For nearly 3,000 years, the humans of Azeroth have grown and prospered, rearing an empire and then 7 wondrous kingdoms across the continents of Lordaeron and Azeroth. The humans defended their lands from trolls and gnolls, and any other menace that threatened their lands. And then the Guardian Medivh, possessed by the Dark Titan Sargeras, opened the Dark Portal, and orcs poured onto Azeroth. The kingdoms were exposed to a threat greater than any they had faced before. In a single generation, the human kingdoms would be changed irrevocably. Fueled into bloodlust by the blood of the demon Manaroth, the orcs started their destructive campaign. The First War had begun. The orcs raided and plundered Stormwind's outer settlements. Farmlands were destroyed, villages razed, and eventually Stormwind Keep itself was assaulted. King Baratheon Rane, hero of the Gnoll War, led in the defense of the keep. He was killed, but the orcs were pushed back from the city. They built a foothold in the Swamp of Sorrows and prepared for a prolonged siege. Baratheon's son, King Lane, sent a request for aid to the northern kingdoms, to Dalaran and the Kirin Tor in particular, and was rejected, just as his father had been during the Gnoll War. The orcs were seen as nothing more than an annoyance to them, and Stormwind was expected to defend its own lands once more. Lane led in the continued defense of Stormwind, and was eventually assassinated by the half-orc Garona. With the humans left without a king, the orcish horde threw themselves at the keep once more, and this time the keep fell. The orcs took the city, and the people of Stormwind were forced to flee their home, led north under the command of Anduin Lothar. The kingdom of Stormwind had fallen. Lothar brought the refugees from Stormwind all the way to Lordaeron, where he urged King Terenas Menethil II not to take the threat of the Horde lightly. The king agreed, and called for the aid of the other 5 kingdoms. Dalaran, Quel'thalas, and Stromgarde all agreed to an alliance against this Horde, but Genn Greymane of Gilneas refused at first, believing his kingdom to be strong enough to deal with the threat themselves, and Perinold of Alterac, believing the Horde too strong to face in open combat, provided only minimal support. With the might of 5 of the 7 human kingdoms, and the eventual addition of the High Elves of Quel'thalas, the Dwarves of the Bronzebeard and Wildhammer clans, and the Gnomes of Gnomeregan, the Alliance of Lordaeron was formed, ready to defend their land against the invaders. The Second War was about to begin. The Horde struck the northern kingdoms with all their might, adding the strength of the forest trolls to their armies. Small towns, South Shore, Hillsbrad, Tar and Mill, folded under the assault of the Horde. At the behest of Zul'jin, the army marched upon Quel'thalas before abandoning the siege and their forest troll allies when the High Elf defenses proved too strong. Eventually, the Horde found an unlikely ally. Seeking self-preservation in the face of war, King Perinold of Alterac struck a deal with the Horde and allowed their armies free passage through his lands, leading the Horde directly to the gates of Lordaeron's capital city. The city was besieged, and was only able to break free when the warlock Gul'dan led half the Horde army away from the fighting to the Broken Isles in search of the Tomb of Sargeras, severely weakening the Horde's power. Lordaeron and its allied forces pushed the remainder of the Horde south, back to Blackrock Spire, and eventually to the Dark Portal itself, driving many of the orcs through the portal and destroying it, marking an end to the Second War. As for the Kingdom of Alterac, the rest of the Alliance had discovered Perinold's treachery during the war, and sought vengeance. Much of the kingdom was burned to the ground, and its king was taken into custody. The Kingdom of Alterac had fallen. The people of Stormwind returned to their lands, and soon New Stormwind was being rebuilt over the ashes of the original Stormwind city. In the north, the kingdoms argued over what to do with the orcs they had captured. Lordaeron argued to have them placed in internment camps, while Gilneas and Stromgarde pushed for their execution. When Lordaeron's plan was put into effect, Gilneas withdrew even the minimal support it had given towards the Alliance. Greymane ordered a wall built to the base of his peninsula, and Gilneas was shut off from the troubles of other humans. Relative peace was found, and for a decade the kingdoms were able to begin recovering their losses. Word of a plague in the east began to reach the courts of Lordaeron. Blackrock orcs began to stir in the hills. Prince Arthas was sent out to defend against the orcs and investigate the source of the plague, and a mysterious man with the ability to shapeshift into a raven bestowed a warning on King Terenas of Lordaeron: flee the eastern kingdoms, search for a continent to the west, and prepare for war. His warning was not heeded by Lordaeron, however. The Third War was about to begin. Antonidas, leader of the Kirin Tor in Dalaran, also received the message, and was equally dubious of the prophet's warning. He sent one of his students, Jaina Proudmoore, to investigate the plague ravaging Lordaeron. She met with Arthas, and together they learned that the plague was being spread by a necromancer, killing civilians and causing corpses to rise as shambling ghouls, the seeds of the Scourge army. The prophet appeared to both Arthas and Jaina, urging them to listen. Arthas, lost to anger and revenge over the deaths of his people, ignored the prophet's warnings. Jaina, on the other hand, sensed the prophet's power and began to suspect truth in his words. When Arthas took his forces to Northrend to pursue the Dreadlord Mal'Ganis, Jaina instead sailed a fleet westward to the ancient lands of Kalimdor. In Northrend, Arthas found the sword Frostmourne and took it up to use in his revenge. The sword was linked with the Lich King Ner'zhul, and its whispers quickly twisted Arthas' mind. Upon defeating Mal'Ganis, he returned to Lordaeron and drove Frostmourne into his father's heart. With the king of Lordaeron dead, the Scourge washing over its lands, and its prince now an agent of the Lich King, the mighty kingdom of Lordaeron fell. The Scourge continued to ravage the entire continent of Lordaeron. Gilneas, fortified behind its walls, found itself under siege by an unending horde of undead. Attempts were made to push back the Scourge, all met with failure, the dead soldiers only bolstering the Scourge's numbers. Finally, worried that the city might be overrun, Greymane gave the mage Arugel the go-ahead on his plan. From the Emerald Dream, Arugel summoned the long-imprisoned Worgen to Azeroth. Once druids, the Worgen had fallen to a curse that came with the druid's pack form. The Worgen pushed back the Scourge, and then immediately turned upon the Gilneans, their curse spreading throughout the population. Many died fighting the beasts, and many more found themselves forever changed. For the next several years, no word of what went on behind the Greymane wall would reach the outside world. Far to the south, beyond the reach of the Scourge, Stormwind found itself facing its own problems. After the reconstruction of its grand city, the Stonemasons Guild and Stormwind's nobles were at odds over payment for their work. Eventually, the disagreement came to blows, and a rebellion broke out in the streets. Queen Tiffin Ryn, Varian Ryn's wife and Anduin's mother, was killed in the fighting. The Stonemasons fled Stormwind, taking up residence in Westfall and renaming themselves the Defias Brotherhood. The Scourge eventually marched on Dalaran, seeking to use the Book of Medivh to summon the Eredar Archimonde. The siege was successful, Antonidas was killed, and Archimonde was summoned to Azeroth. The Eredar Lord personally saw to the annihilation of Dalaran, using his magics to crush Dalaran's towers and spires, before beginning his destructive campaign across the face of Azeroth. The kingdom of Dalaran had fallen. Across the ocean, on the forgotten continent of Kalimdor, Jaina's fleet built the port town of Theramore. The prophet that tried to warn the peoples of Lordaeron of the coming war revealed himself to be Medivh, the same Medivh that was once possessed by Sargeras and opened the Dark Portal. He is able to convince Jaina, Malfurion, and Thrall to join the forces of humans, night elves, and the growing Horde in an effort to repel Archimonde and the demon invaders. The alliance succeeded, and with Archimonde's defeat, the Third War came to an end. Where 7 human kingdoms once stood before the Age of Chaos, only fragments now remained. Lordaeron, fallen to the Scourge. Alterac, burned by its peers for its betrayal. Gilneas, beset by the Worgen curse and locked away behind its walls. Dalaran, thoroughly crushed by the magics of the Burning Legion. Stromgarde, dwindling in power after exhaustive war and the loss of its allies. And Stormwind, destroyed, rebuilt, and then beset by rebellion. Even Quel'thalas, protected by ocean and its naval fleet, was not untouched by the wars. Humans, it seemed, had fallen far, a mere shadow of the strength once held by the Erythorian Empire. In time, Dalaran would rebuild its city and rejoin the efforts of mortals in protecting Azeroth. Stormwind would find itself a center for Alliance activity, and the people of Gilneas, their land beset by war, would rejoin the Alliance. Despite their turmoil, humans would be ready to lead in the war against the Burning Legion, for the kingdom still standing, and for the memory of those that had fallen.